What a senseless, violent act. The murder of two young teenagers while out camping.
Two teenagers were shot and killed while camping on Mount Ord in Arizona, allegedly by a random stranger. And months of investigation have led police to one suspect, 31-year-old Thomas Brown. But how did they connect him to this scene? Tips from campers, DNA evidence, it all raised red flags. We are going to break down exactly what investigators found, what it all means, and we're going to do it all with a retired police sergeant. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. This is the kind of press conference that no sheriff ever wants to hold.
I wish I didn't have to stand here and talk about this case. What a senseless, violent act. The murder of two young teenagers while out camping. Then comes the parents' worst nightmare. Knock on the door by a sheriff's detective to tell them that their child is dead.
That was Maricopa County Sheriff Jerry Sheridan, and he was announcing the murders of two teenagers, 18-year-old Pandora Schulzrud and 17-year-old Evan Clark, both shot and killed while simply camping on Mount Ord, a summit in the Tonto National Forest in Maricopa County, Arizona. Well, now, months after their tragic killings, investigators say they have their suspect, Thomas Brown, a man whose DNA, according to police, was found in the victim's SUV and on gloves that were stained with blood. At his first court hearing, prosecutors laid it all out.
Both of these victims were shot multiple times. Brown's DNA is found in the victim's SUV. Brown's DNA is found inside of the gloves with the blood on the outside.
And now there is this newly released probable cause affidavit, and it is revealing even more chilling details about this story. So with an arrest made, new court documents unsealed, we are getting our clearest look yet at what police say happened on that mountain. And this all started on Memorial Day weekend, May 25th, 2025, when these two friends, Pandora and Evan, they had plans to camp overnight on Mount Ord, and that is when everything changed. The next day, when their families couldn't reach them, a call came in. A call came into the Gila County Sheriff's Office reporting them missing. And in fact, police detailed their response during a press conference on Friday, October 3rd.
On May 26th, the Gila County Sheriff's Office received a call for service about an overdue party located in the Mount Ord area. Mount Ord is a popular camping location and a mountain in the Tonto National Forest. It's off the State Route 87, somewhere between Mesa and Payson. The complainant advised GCSO that her daughter was out camping with friends, and her last known location was on Mount Ord. The complainant also provided pictures for us of her daughter's camping trip, which she had received.
Deputies went out searching, and that is when things took a turn. They first found Evan's vehicle parked off the roadway, but right away, something wasn't right. Deputies, they noticed blood on the bumper. They noticed a bloody pillowcase that was found inside. And when they searched further up the mountain, that is when they discovered drag marks, and they were leading away from a campsite. So they follow those tracks, and when they do, deputies make this grim discovery.
The sergeant tried to make contact with any occupants there, but was unable to, and he made some suspicious observations regarding that car. The sergeant requested some backup, and a deputy arrived later to assist him on scene. GCSO deputies did not find anyone around the vehicle, and later continued their search until they found a campground up further on the mountain. In that campsite, they noticed conditions that suggested there was evidence of something being dragged away from that camp area. They would then locate the bodies of Pandora Schulzrud and Evan Clark, who were pronounced deceased on the scene.
Obviously, this is a big update in this case, and the reason that we can bring you this is because of the incredible support that we get from our sponsor, Upside. This is the free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas, groceries, food. So I pump my gas, I can use Upside. I go out to lunch, I can use Upside. Maybe I get something from a convenience store, I can use Upside. And why wouldn't I want to get cash back when I do all these things, right? This is actual, real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you can then transfer right into your bank account. So once you have the free Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying in Upside. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app, you get paid. To find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen, but make sure to use our promo code Sidebar because you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Quick jurisdictional note here. Because the Maricopa and Gila County lines run through Mount Ord, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, they were the ones who took over the investigation. Now, their homicide unit would spend months piecing together what happened in this rugged, remote area.
It's been a very difficult case to work. It happened in such a remote area. They couldn't rely on Ring cameras. They couldn't rely on pings from cell phones, and they couldn't rely on any other video that normally we would have in an urban area. So it made it very difficult and a technical investigation, and that's why it's taken this long to get this far.
That is until a few major tips came in. Tips that would lead police to one suspect, 31-year-old Thomas Brown.
Detectives received various tips regarding this incident over the next several days and weeks, and one of those tips revealed that there was a male subject identified as Thomas Brown who advised he had been camping on Mount Ord on that particular day. Detectives also received a tip from another group of campers who they say was camping on Mount Ord the evening of the 25th and left on the morning of the 26th. That tip indicated that the campers, while they were there, encountered an individual that they perceived as acting very strangely. The tip from those campers detailed some very specific observations that caused our detectives to heighten our focus and focus our investigative efforts into Thomas Brown's involvement, in addition to continuing to follow all the other leads that we had. During an interview with those same tipsters, they remembered parts of their outing and delineated specific facts that resolved some of the questions surrounding the location and position of evidence gathered at the crime scene. Some of this information corroborated evidence pointing to Brown's involvement in Evan and Pandora's murder.
Now, when detectives interviewed Brown, he actually admitted he was there. Yeah, he said he camped with his wife, flew a drone, saw a young male and female in a silver SUV that matched Evan's car, but he insisted he never touched them or their belongings. Here's the problem with that. The evidence didn't match his story. Now, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into a lot, but first, so I want to bring in a special guest right now. I want to bring in retired police sergeant and author of the new book, Chasing Down the Zombie Hunter. Troy Hillman is with us right now. Troy, thank you so much for taking the time. It's good to see you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So from your experience, how typical is it for law enforcement to encounter a case like this one? You're in this Mount Ord area. The victims are in this remote location. There's little to no digital or camera evidence. You know, from my point of view, I imagine in a way that might help. It might narrow down the likelihood of what happened. It might narrow down a suspect. It's not like on a busy metropolitan street where you think, oh, this could be a carjacking or something like this. I wonder if it helps or hurts an investigation.
I think you're right. I think both. You've got an outdoor remote location where people can easily, it's somewhat accessible. And you really there's no real regulations on who goes hiking or walking, or nobody tracks that. So, but there's lack of surveillance. There's lack of things that normally police detectives would look at to try to figure out who was there to put somebody at the scene.
And when deputies first discovered this car with the blood and the drag marks, if you were part of this investigation, what are the immediate investigative priorities that you have to establish at that scene, and what are you looking out for?
Yeah, they have to lock down the scene immediately because the scene ultimately tells detectives what happened. And so if you have it trampled, if you have people kind of rummaging through, say, the vehicle, it's a bad thing and can actually contaminate DNA and that kind of thing. So locking it down like they did, it was extremely important. And from what I can tell, they did a phenomenal job of doing that on the onset.
You mentioned the DNA. I said this before. So police say the evidence in the case didn't match what Brown had told them. And they say it was actually DNA testing that later tied him to the inside of Evan's vehicle. His DNA was apparently inside a pair of gloves that were found near the car as well, gloves that also contain a hiking path that Brown claimed to have used. They found more of the victim's belongings that were scattered along the trail. Take a listen.
Based on that evidence collected, Thomas Brown provided false and misleading information regarding his involvement. It was the comparison of his statements and that physical evidence that led us to believe that. He was apprehended and booked into MCSO jail yesterday for 2 counts of first-degree murder.
Now, Brown made his first court appearance last week. We're going to get to that. But first, Troy, suspects allegedly providing false or misleading accounts. How does it work? When someone makes a statement, do you automatically try to corroborate it? And how do you know it might not be, hey, there was a mistake, a simple mistake in their record and the way that they told the story, versus maybe there's an alternative explanation for why what they said wasn't true, versus, okay, this is suspicious?
Yeah, so typically as a detective, the ultimate for you when interviewing is to get a full confession. And then you kind of work your way down, and then basically the next best thing you could expect would be a full denial when it doesn't match what you have as far as physical evidence. And then you get into far-fetched stories, and what you don't want is you don't really want silence from the perpetrator, and you don't want these what I call plausible explanations. But within those far-fetched stories and plausible explanations, you want to kind of figure out where they're, what doesn't line up, and kind of go from there and kind of look at that. But he was definitely in the denial, far-fetched explanation territory.
That's a piece of the puzzle. I mean, you have right behind you cold cases matter. And when I'm looking at that and I'm thinking about a case like this, DNA is such a critical component. But I do wonder, from an investigative point of view, what are the challenges? Because if you have multiple DNA samples that are present, suspect DNA mixed with a victim DNA, even advances in DNA testing, I'm sure it's changed the way cold cases or delayed investigations are solved. What are the challenges when you're dealing with DNA and a mixture of DNA?
And DNA is powerful, as you know, and it basically is irrefutable in that. But there are some times where a perpetrator could explain, hey, yeah, of course, I came along later and I touched X, Y, and Z. But if it's not lining up with what they're saying, then there's the problem. So, but yeah, there can be mixtures, there can be contamination. That's why it's important to lock down the scene like they did and collect it, and be very careful. And they're professionals; they know what they're doing. So that it's just, again, very powerful tool. And then you also have an arsenal of tools in the toolbox, I call it, with fingerprints. You have cell phones. You have other things that you can just witness statements to corroborate all this. And what you're ultimately trying to build towards is this probable cause, which is a level of circumstances and facts that would lead a reasonable person to believe that this person committed the crime. So, and they obviously got there with Brown.
So let's fast forward to October 2nd. This is when Brown made his first court appearance in Maricopa County Superior Court and addressed the judge.
All right, sir, you're here on a Superior Court new case alleging 2 counts of murder in the first degree. I noticed that you have an attorney here. He tells me that this is a limited appearance. You did not give any information in terms of your financial affidavit. Are you working?
I am working, but currently I own an LLC and don't have access to my computer, so I'm unable to work.
Okay, you don't have access to your what?
My computer, which is how I run my LLC.
Are you self-employed?
Correct. I own an LLC.
Okay. Well, I am going to appoint you an attorney. Now, if you and counsel work something out, that's fine. I do want to make sure that you have an attorney at your next hearing.
And prosecutors also asked for a significant bond, citing the severity of the alleged crime and the evidence that was collected.
State is requesting a $2 million cash bond due to the gravity of these crimes. The case does involve, as Your Honor is well aware from the Form 4, the murder of two teenagers who were camping. Both of these victims were shot multiple times. Both of the victims were moved and concealed in the brush. As you noted from the Form 4 judge, Brown's DNA is found in the victim's SUV. Brown's DNA is found inside of the gloves with the blood on the outside. I'm not going to rehash all of the details from the Form 4. As Your Honor asked, Brown does have a job. He runs his own business. Brown also has a spouse who is employed. The state believes that Brown is a danger to the community, a potential flight risk, and given the nature of this crime itself, we would ask for that $2 million cash bond. Thank you, Judge.
But Brown's defense, they countered. They countered by pointing out that while Brown had admitted to being on the mountain, the affidavit left gaps. Here's what they argued.
And I had a chance to read the addendum in this case. And, you know, I was left with the question in terms of what was the conduct here that caused the death? I mean, you have to infer from the Form 4. I understand that, you know, there's mention of Mr. Brown's DNA on certain items on the scene. He doesn't deny in the probable cause statement that he had contact with both of the alleged victims. He was there camping, he was there hiking. But importantly, there's little reference to where Mr. Brown's DNA was not found. And what's interesting is no mention in the addendum that they were found on the shell casings. There's no mention that any of the DNA was found on items. They make mention in the Form 4 that there were these items along a trail that presumably Mr. Brown hiked. And yet there's no DNA on any of these items that were collected at all. There's reference to a search warrant that was done here. And there was a search warrant that the way it's referenced in the addendum is that it was somehow limited to fingerprints or was limited to obtaining his DNA. In fact, there was a pretty comprehensive search that occurred months prior to today where they searched his residence, they searched his vehicle, and there's no reference at all to that there were any items that connected Mr. Brown to the alleged murder. And so Judge, Mr. Brown, I understand he didn't provide any information. He has no criminal history whatsoever. He's been a resident of Phoenix for quite some time, for I think 5 years. He's married, served in the military for 10 years. We'd ask the court to impose a bond consistent with the information that's provided in the addendum, which again, you have to infer here that Mr. Brown was somehow connected to this conduct and what that conduct was. And so we'd ask the court to impose a bond that is less than $2 million cash.
Now, the court found that probable cause existed, meaning there was enough credible evidence to move forward with the charges, and the judge granted the state's request in large part, setting bond at $2 million, cash only. Additional conditions included no contact with the victims' families. He can't go back to the crime scene. He can't have any weapons. Troy, do you think there are gaps here? When you listen to the defense, I mean, it's kind of a preview of what they would argue at a future trial, but do you think there are gaps here in DNA and the investigation?
I do, but I also feel like the law enforcement reached that level of, like you indicated, probable cause, that, hey, we need to arrest this individual and get him off the streets. And then things, basically there's additional things that'll, as it works its way towards the court, that'll be done. So there's more, I think there's more pieces to the puzzle that maybe have not been released that will be released to the defense at some point. So we're not seeing the whole equation, I think, because it's up to the prosecutors now to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a higher threshold than the probable cause. But where the gun is, that there's some definitely unanswered questions.
Why? Why is that the case? You know, the defense highlights that Brown's DNA wasn't apparently found on the shell casings or certain items. How common is that? How common is that for suspects or defendants to maybe have DNA present in some locations or on some items, but not others? Obviously, we cover trials all the time where defense attorneys jump on that, or they try to suggest perhaps there's someone else's DNA there. But why is that the case?
Well, shell casings have always been difficult, from my understanding and talking to the experts over at the crime lab. There's been different techniques, gun bluing, and the different types of fingerprint analysis and DNA run those. But so it gets so hot. My understanding is that the discharge of the projectile, that the casing doesn't always maintain a good DNA sample. So that's always been a challenge. So sometimes not everything's gonna basically have DNA on it. It's not like in the movies where everything just kind of works out. There are challenges, but if you have he places himself there. The witnesses place him there. His statements are all over the board and inconsistent with what was found at the scene. The victim's blood is on a glove that he's found wearing. So, yeah, I don't know if they can prove that he pulled the trigger at this point, but there's also definite things that he needs to explain as what involvement he had with their deaths.
I do want to get into this now. I want to get into the case that investigators have built against Thomas Brown, and it's inside this probable cause affidavit, okay? So it starts with what deputies first saw when they arrived at Evan Clark's car. The affidavit reads, when a GCSO sergeant arrived in the area, he located a 1998 Mercedes-Benz vehicle later identified belonging to V2. That's Evan Clark, displaying historic plates parked off the roadway and between trees, brush. The sergeant stopped to contact anyone inside and noticed blood on the back bumper of the vehicle. The sergeant requested backup, and a deputy arrived on the scene a short time later. GCSO deputies cleared the vehicle for any subjects. The sergeant stated the driver's side doors were locked and the only unlocked door was the rear passenger door. While clearing the vehicle, they noticed a bloody pillowcase inside. Now, from there, deputies followed the drag marks away from the campsite, and it led to the bodies of Pandora and Evan. But the trail of evidence didn't stop there, because at another site about 1.5 miles away, detectives recovered something so critical in this case. The affidavit reads, in the area where V2's vehicle was found, detectives located a pair of gloves, left and right. While processing the exterior of V2's vehicle, detectives noted what appeared to be imprints on the tailgate area of the vehicle, which appeared consistent with the same groove detail found on the gloves. The gloves also had what appeared to be blood on the exterior. The affidavit also shows how tips from other campers lined up with the evidence. It reads, the tip from the 5 campers indicated while camping at Mount Ord, they encountered an individual who they perceived as being strange. The tip indicated the male subject they encountered was driving a blue Kia Rio and provided the license plate to the vehicle. After further investigation, detectives learned the Kia Rio was registered to Thomas Brown. During an interview with the 5 campers individually, 2 of the campers recalled driving up the mountain on the evening of May 25th, 2025, when they noticed a blue vehicle parked near a turn out of the mountain. At the same time as they drove past the blue vehicle, they saw a silver Mercedes SUV driving down the mountain and parked directly behind the blue vehicle. One of these campers also said the blue vehicle he saw parked in the same area where the Mercedes was located by GCSO. One of the campers later saw a blue vehicle driven by Thomas parked next to their vehicle and identified it as the same vehicle they saw by the Mercedes on their way up the mountain. Now let's start right there. So Troy, they were interviewed individually. That's the key, right? So if you're talking about corroboration, if you're talking about their account, how important are they going to be to this?
Very important. They did a phenomenal job of being aware of something happening, and getting the license plate, getting a make and model of the vehicle. So that was crucial. And yeah, keeping them separate is very important. It's something standard protocol and police work that we do.
Now, during an interview with detectives, Thomas Brown, the suspect here, provided a detailed account of his movements on Mount Ord. Told investigators that he had been camping with his wife from May 23rd to May 26, 2025, but that she left on the morning of the 25th while he stayed behind until the morning of the 26th. Quote, Thomas mentioned on the morning of the 25th, after his wife left, he drove to the top of the mountain where he flew his drone. So Brown described encountering a younger male and female near a campsite at the top of the mountain. They were in a silver SUV with historic plates, a description that matched the victims and their vehicle. Quote, Thomas was asked if he ever had physical contact with the male and female. Thomas explained during the interaction he never had physical contact with the male or female. According to Brown, he left the campsite area, drove down the mountain, parked near a turnout before hiking back up to the campsite, and while there, he claimed to have noticed scattered items, including a gray tote with camping equipment and an air rifle. He admitted to picking up and rummaging through these items, but said he put them back where he found them. Brown said he hiked back down to the vehicle and returned later to the campsite where he planned to stay overnight. By that time, the silver SUV was gone. He encountered 5 other campers in a white truck with whom he interacted throughout the evening. And detectives questioned him about why his DNA might be found on the victim's belongings, and he denied any knowledge of how that could have happened. He also denied ever entering the SUV. And after the interview, detectives obtained a search warrant to collect Brown's DNA, full fingerprints, photographs. Following that, Brown was released. And of course, we know that he was later arrested following the results from that DNA testing. Troy, talk to me about what stands out to you regarding his account.
So he's in that denial phase that is actually good for investigators, because he's saying, hey, I was never inside the vehicle. I was never, I did do certain things. So then he's kind of in that far-fetched story, he's trying to come up with a plausible explanation. But it all just, to me, just didn't add up, his behavior. I think he's throwing things out, and then the denial of inside the SUV, and then the gloves with the victim's blood on it, you have to be able to explain that.
Look, at the end of the day, from a human point of view, right? Put aside the law, you put aside the investigation. What do you have? You have two teenagers on the edge of adulthood, their entire lives ahead of them, gone. Evan's mother, Sandra Sweeney, shared her grief on a GoFundMe page, writing, Evan wasn't a typical teenager. He was funny, bright, kind, and entrepreneurial. He was an old soul who was sensitive and loving. Evan wrote me letters, the last of which he gave me on Mother's Day, that was so touching it made me both laugh and cry. He was special. He deserved a long life. And for Pandora, her family wrote, she had a vivacious personality with an infectious smile that brought joy to so many. She was a beautiful human being and a bright light in this world who loved every single person she met and had a unique ability to make every person feel special. As for Thomas Brown, he has a status conference set for October 8th, and according to the Maricopa County Public Information Officer, the case will go to a grand jury for an official indictment. Troy, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jesse.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll see you next time.